Let's bring in Kylie Tlakumala as we speak about this particular story. This is bizarre. This is very, very confusing, right? Because Kylie, we've seen various processes that were taking place here to try and find a solution in the Eastern DRC. We often hear about African solutions for African problems, yet this move, what's going on?
Well, quite a very unprecedented move, Bongo, especially because we know that whether you're looking at the Rwanda process or the Nairobi process that has since been merged, where also they have been trying so hard to get President Kagame and President Tshisekedi under one room. We've seen the failures of that. I mean, you look at the peace talks that were supposed to take place in Angola. So it was also just a part of making sure that these two countries, at least they earn trust from each other. So it took Qatar to do all of this. So something that was totally unexpected, especially because now they're talking also about the immediate ceasefire, but also the cessation of hostilities, especially because the conflict is still continuing, notwithstanding that announcement that was made by the SADC that they're going to pull out from the eastern part of Congo, of course, in a very phased out approach. But all in all, a very, very quite a surprising step here.
And, you know, when you think about that communique that was issued by SADC, it speaks about the Rwanda process that is now going to continue. And then one wonders, where does all of that then leave this particular process?
Well, absolutely, Bongi, especially because we've seen quite a number of extraordinary steps where we've seen the joint summits between the East African leaders and SADC leaders trying to focus on this issue because it's been a major preoccupation. At the recent AU summit, it was a major talking point where they were talking about the issue for the African leaders to find a solution. But albeit now the issue is they want to lay these foundations in terms of making sure that we do see a long-lasting peace. As to whether will Qatar be able to succeed, especially because, I mean, as much as they've been playing a role also with the ceasefire in the Middle East between the Israelis and the US, and also just Israel and, you know, the Palestinian issue and many other conflicts as well. Are they going to succeed in this regard? But you do get also a sense from a number of analysts who are saying that Qatar really is, you know, punching above its weight as this mediator, but also in terms of their own interest in these two countries. In Rwanda, you look at the stake within the Rwanda, you know, they do have quite a substantial say in terms of so many economic transactions, but also you look at the DRC itself, you know, I think there was a talk around the refurbishment of certain airports and Qatar playing a very key role. So others are saying it's not such a very altruistic mission. Qatar also does have its own interest in terms of making sure that these two countries are fairly stable.
Be that as it may, right, as they can talk about everything right now, but you do have the M23 that's saying, why run a parallel process? Because we also were supposed to be here. I mean, you think about that communique from SADC that was saying that, you know, non-party state players, everybody must be at the table, military, non-military, everyone. And now they then said they're not going to be part of that process, but then now they're saying there's a parallel process that's taking place. And given the fact that we often hear that there are a number of different groupings in the Eastern DRC. So what happens there in those talks in Doha? One wonders if it'll translate to action on the ground.
Well, absolutely, and there's quite a lot of mistrust in this regard. For example, you do have those within DRC who often say that when you look at Kenya, it seems to be very much close to Kigali or Rwanda, but also the whole issue around the inclusive dialogue, that has been a mantra. You look at so many successive meetings, whether you're looking at the joint meetings between the leaders from SADC, EAC, the issue has always been really just the involvement of all the parties, and all the eyes really were in Angola, where there was a whole issue around the momentum to have these talks led by the African Union chairperson, João Lorenzo, who's also Angola's president. But now you do have this particular issue, and they talk about this ceasefire, how is it going to be achieved? Especially because, to all intents and purposes, the DRC government, you know, they've lost quite a substantial number of territory in the eastern part of Congo. So how are they going to achieve that? But also the whole issue about the African solutions for the African problems. I mean, it really just brings into question, how are they going to really work around this issue? How are they going to stabilize the issue of the DRC? But also even the process of phasing out semi-DRC, how are they going to achieve it? Especially now because you do have the M23 saying that one of the major challenges they faced, the sanctions imposed on their leaders from the EU, and obviously EU saying some of these leaders have been behind some of the worst atrocities in the eastern part of the DRC. So there's quite a lot of questions. So lots of questions and less answers in this
and it really sounds like, Kailika, you also might then maybe see an M23 that sits there at that same table, because you speak about territories. A lot of people are asking questions, what's going to happen there? Will they be able to surrender? And then at the same time, what about these sanctions?
So it appears to be a very intractable conflict, Bongo, especially because of the hostilities that are still continuing, and also the M23 still really just making inroads in so many towns, in so many key areas, because you look at the recent Council of Ministers meeting in Zimbabwe, in Harare, there was a clear emphasis in terms of the humanitarian disaster for the displacees to get humanitarian aid. It's almost 7 million people displaced, and the UN says over 6,000 people have been killed since the conflict really escalated. So it continues to really just worsen on the ground. But with all these developments, really, how's it going to really play out? So I suppose that's a very, very big question for the players in the region, but also given the far-reaching implications in the Great Lakes region. If the DRC is imploding, it's going to have an impact on Rwanda itself, on Burundi, so many countries in that parts of Africa. Quite
an interesting development there. Kailika, thank you so much as always for bringing us up to speed. My colleague there, SABC News reporter, Kailika Kumalo.